What's up guys, it's Adam with RC Logger, and today we are going to do a demonstrational video on how to swap out the main flight controller for the RC EYE One Xtreme. We're going to start off with a fresh flight control board. This is what it's going to look like when you receive it, and obviously your Xtreme quad. For tools, I've got the RC Logger bit set, driver set. It's a real nice set. It's relatively inexpensive. I think it's like $20 or $25. You can check it out at rclogger.com. And I am done with my shameless plug. Alright, I'm going to try to make this informational and fun for you. I've seen so many videos on the internet where it just makes you want to pull your hair out because people bore you to death. And I'm going to do my best to not do that. So for starters, we're going to remove the main cover. Take note on the foam pad. The foam pad inside the main cover protects the barometric sensor. It's a light sensitive sensor, so we use the pad to cover up the sensor, and that makes it work better. For starters, we're going to make an indication of our wiring, and I've already done that. So basically I drew my quadcopter, and I drew my front facing arrow indicating which way is forward, and then I indicated the colors of the wires from each motor. So I have black, red, and white, and then over here I have white, red, and black, and on the bottom I just did the same thing. So when I pull my flight controller out and put my new one in, I can connect my wires exactly the way they came, and I know I will get the correct rotation of my propellers. It's a nice little cheat. Use it. Alright, let's go ahead and take the old flight controller out. For starters, what we're going to do is back off these set screws right here. And I'm just going to turn them 3 or 4 turns each one, just to give some room so I can pull the old wires out. This part is already taking way too darn long, right? Alright, so let's see. The next thing I'm going to do, another tool I forgot to mention that would be worthwhile having, is a pair of tweezers. Alright, so I've got all my set screws backed out. Now I'm just going to take my wires and remove them from the connector. Just kind of move them out of the way a little bit. Obviously make sure you don't have a battery plugged in at this point in time. And if you do, you probably shouldn't be doing this in the first place because it's not safe. So, pull my wires away, and the next thing I need to do is move on to dropping the battery tray. The battery tray itself is mounted to the flight control board. So I'm going to switch my bit out here. There's a total of 8 screws on this flight control board. The smaller of 4 screws are the screws that hold the battery tray in. They are the closest in on the flight control board. So 1, 2, 3, let's see, make sure I got it, 3 right here, and 4. Now 4 is the little bugger. 4 is hidden underneath this 3-pin connector, and that's the PWM connector. I'm going to show you how to do that in a second. So I'm going to start with the easiest of the 3 screws. And this helps if you do not have sausage fingers like I do. So there's one. Save them. There's a little washer on there too. You're going to want to reuse it. It's a very small washer. There's 2. 3. And the 4th one is the bugger that's hiding. So you're going to kind of get in there at a little bit of an angle, like this. Let's see, make sure it's in frame. Yep, a little bit of angle. And slowly turn on that bad boy until it pops out. You'll know you have it because the battery tray will come loose. So grab all them screws out of there because we're going to need them for our new flight controller. And then we're going to move on to the 4 screws that hold the flight control on the mainframe itself. Now, there are suspension washers, little rubber grommets, if you will, standoffs, that are implemented to provide vibration isolation for the main flight controller. This makes your RC EYE Xtreme fly better. So it's very important that you do not lose any of these isolators. There are 4 on the top and 4 on the bottom. So one of the things I like to do is kind of set it down on a flat surface, and I just take my time, and this is what one will look like. Oh, can we get some 1080p up in here? Not gonna happen, is it? Maybe something like right in there. Okay, so it's got a little rubber washer on it, basically. Let's take these 4 screws out. And now I'm going to show you that you should not just rip your board off of your unit because it is still somewhat connected. There are orientation LEDs that are connected to the main flight control board. In order to remove them, what I do is I start at the front and I just pop that guy up and out. I don't hope you saw that. And then I'm going to move off to the side. Let's make sure we get this in frame. And I'm just going to pop that too. So there's just 2 little prongs right there. And then move over to this side and pull that up. Alright, now, it's important that I keep my orientation correct. However, you can't put this board in. I guess you could put it in backwards, but one of the ways that you could identify that you're putting it in the right way is the battery jack will go into the battery jack receiving slot in the mainframe. So, old flight controller, you're going to remove this and put it off to the side so you don't accidentally reinstall it thinking you're putting a new one in. So then we're going to move on to reinstalling the flight controller, and the first thing I'm going to make sure of is that my little rubber grommets on the bottom side of my frame are in place. And one of them was a little loose, so I put it in place and I'm good to go. Now the next thing I'm going to do is reinstall my flight controller, my new replacement flight controller. And this is a little tricky, it takes a little patience. I'm going to start off with just the same way I left off, which is reinstalling the orientation LEDs. And it takes a little bit of patience to get them lined up. There's one. Move over to the front. Now the trick is to be careful you don't jar loose the rubber grommets that support the mainframe or the flight controller to the mainframe. So you want to make sure that you aren't bumping them loose, and then once you get your LEDs lined up, you'll just slightly seat the board. Just make sure I'm in everywhere. Oops, one of them came off. So this just takes a little patience, a little time. And there we go. All are seated. Clear my wires out of the way. Now if you've done it correctly, in this case I have, woohoo, good for me. If you've done it correctly, you're going to notice that the rubber grommets are basically ready to receive the screws. So I'm going to basically take my screws with my grommets and reinstall them onto the proper hole. These are the outside, foremost outside holes. Now look, you don't have to crank these screws down tight, just snug them up. If you crank it down too tight, you're going to basically defeat the purpose of the grommet itself, which is to isolate vibrations. So you just basically want to just seat the screw, don't overdo it. 3 or 4 turns, something like that. Just make sure it's not too loose, make sure it's not too tight. Okay, then we'll move back onto the battery tray. I'm going to line it up. It's omnidirectional, it doesn't matter which way the tray faces, it will mount either way. So I'm going to put the tray in and I'm just going to look for the screws to line up. The holes themselves, they're kind of set, so you'll actually almost, it'll seat into place. It won't snap into place, but it will seat into place. And then I'm going to install my screws for it. Run all 4 of those in. I'm going to do the 3 easiest screws first. That way I know the tray itself is lined up. And seat them as well. Okay, cool. Now the last screw is a little tricky because you got to kind of take it in at an angle. I have sausage fingers, so if you have smaller fingers than I do, it's going to be easier for you. And you just want to get it started and carefully run the last screw in. Basically after that, you're going to switch your bits out and attach your motor wires in the correct orientation. Refer to the chart that you made initially. This is where the tweezers come in handy. And I'm going to just do a couple of these and then end this video for the sake of it not taking forever. So you're going to realign your wires with the hole. There's a small hole at the bottom of the connector, and hold it into place and set the screw. Now you'll know you have set it properly if you give this wire a tug and it does not come out. You're going to repeat that step in the color coordination that you've already documented all the way around, and that will complete the flight controller swap for the RC EYE One Xtreme. Hopefully that wasn't too painful. Also make sure when you put your main cap back on, your foam block is over the altitude pressure sensor and you're ready to go fly. Alright, thanks for watching guys. Take care.